One of the first things that I do for data is I take a look at the prior year of students and how they did on their STAR assessment. So I teach English 2 currently. And so what I do is I request the information for STAR English 1 so that I know more or less where my students are at. Then from there, I start off with an assessment. Um, Typically, it's a diagnostics. And then after every unit exam, what I continue to do is I continue to pull information that I need in order to capture data. So the first assessment that I take pretty much looks like this. We're looking at students who are critical, does not meet, approaches, meets, and masters. This is then broken down into the percentages of students and where they fit. And then we take a look here and we look at the questions and their performance in accordance to every single question. The next thing that I do is based on how students do on an assessment. I like to take the questions and I like to break them down. Here we see the number of students and mastery and the outcome, and then students who struggled and were not able to hit mastery. This is then broken down. So one of the takes here would be that these students were not able to compose an argumentative text using genre characteristics and craft. And then here on the other one, we have grammatical errors such as misspelling of a word. Here we look at the causes. This is how we break down my data. So the error here is that the says means matters and the complexity within the essay wasn't fully developed. The underlying misconception here is the fact that they only stated one brief statement for the entire essay, and they needed to be able to consist of two. The root cause is not enough in-depth assignments with revision. So here I looked and reflected at what I was doing wrong, and I felt that I needed to do more essays in order to be able to have student growth. So the solution here would be that I would provide a persuasive template to break down text and student essays, and then be able to revise and edit templates with them. Here for the grammatical errors, spelling and things of that sort. The common misconception here is misspelling of a word, and the underlying misconception is common misspelling enforce to enforce, or societies with an IES to societies with the Y, comma S. So the root cause here, I believe, is that students, when they speak, they tend to write that same way. And if students use the dictionary, which is allowed on Start English 2, these words would all show up as correct. However, it was used incorrectly within the sentence. And so the solution in order to fix something of this sort would then be using vocabulary and daily edits. Daily edits I like to do with a program called Quill. This would then be embedded into what we would call a do now. And then the grammar lessons would then take place on Nearpod, and then I would grade these assignments. So the reason why I do everything digitally is so that students get the hang of typing, which is also something that I've noticed. It's not something that we would see here within the data that is captured when testing. However, that would be time. So some students, when we shut down and do mock exams, semester exams, practice exams, benchmarks, things of that sort, and they have the full day to test, this is where we start to see that students are taking the full 8 hours, not able to completely compose an essay because they run out of time. And so then that would be something else that I also look at when it comes to data. Here, the next breakdown that I like to do is every passage according to its genre. So we have several passages that are listed here. With these passages, you'll see that we have The Lost City, and this is revision. The next genre, which is Catching a Wave, would then be revise. We also have a different kind of princess, which means that students have to edit and make changes of that sort. We have fiction. We break down the questions according to its passage and the genre that it is in accordance with. And then we go ahead and I break down each single question, the average score. And this is how I start to pull which questions need more, um, either a whole group or small group, just depends on the question and the class period. This is a continuation. So this was a benchmark that was given, or my semester exam. So this then continues to break down it persuasive, expository, which would be informational on most essays and things of that sort. This is the breakdown as well, and we start to see what the average is of passing or mastery for each student, or not each student, per grade. The next thing that I also like to do, because STAR is the essay is 25% of the overall grade. I also like to break down how students do within that time capsule of writing an essay, and this is where I become a little bit more strategic. So while we see that students are struggling with comma, semicolons, and things grammatically of that sort, my do now will now consist of those grammatical errors, because STAR also, according to the rubric, has conventions, and conventions now leads to grammar at a 10th grade level. And so the do now would consist of that. And then we would go on into an assignment such as working out an essay. So the essay then is configured of the thesis, the introduction, the line of reasoning, organizations, conventions. And so here we would look to see what students, and this is actually broken down on a separate spreadsheet, which I won't include because there are several student names that would be there. And so here it's 3 students who were critical. Mastery overall for the thesis was 83%. And so I'm starting to break down how students are doing. And so while most students did score a 3, we didn't have any students who scored a 4. 4 would be hitting mastery completely. And so here we just break down how students actually did on a scale of 0 to 4 or 0 to 5. Um, and then we go to see, well, how, what solution are we going to do. So we will get students to write essays and answer the prompt question: yes or no, maturity is dependent of age. This is based on the prompt question, the thesis that they were supposed to answer. And so maturity was, is it dependent of age or not? This was the article that the essay that they had to write based on an article. um, then the next thing is introduction. So if we don't have a thesis, you can see that it carries on with an intro, as the thesis is part of the introduction, or at least that's how I teach. And so in order to correct this, then we would get students to write an essay and answer the prompt question, but we also have to look at the hook and things of that sort. Do we have a hook? Do we have a transitional sentence? Do we have a thesis? Um, when it comes to writing a persuasive argumentative essay, we had 12 students who didn't have their line of reasoning. And so this meant that it was critically low. Here, we would implement a T chart or a Venn diagram in order to help organize their thoughts so that they would be able to come up with a claim and then a counterclaim with that as well. The next thing that I like to do is I like to break down every section in accordance to class period. So these are fake names that I've created here. And then I look at ELs. So for example, let's say I had 27 ELs. How exactly did these 27 ELs do? And then we start with the critical, does not meet, meets, master, so on and so forth. And this is where I would break down each student, how exactly they did. And we also look at SPED students. So if we look at data, now we understand that if you want to hit your TIA to be a master teacher, what Texas actually does is it looks at the growth of a student within the classroom after they've tested for STAR. And then, depending on the amount of growth that is shown or the points that are earned, this is how you hit mastery, which is how I've been able to hit mastery ever since TIA rolled out. And so I go ahead and I look at data like this, and this is how I'm able to get the most points to show growth. What I also start to look at is every student to see, is this what this student needs? Do I need small group? Here, as you can see, we have a lot of students who actually hit meets. And so that's beneficial for our growth count so that we could hit that TIA mastery. And then here we had one EL student who actually hit masters. Here for SPED students, we see that we got 50% that was critical does not meet. And so then this would be my focus when it came to small group within these class periods. Um, the class periods are broken down here. Like I said, we want to make sure that we're hitting our goals. So then students are broken down by class period. So I know specifically what I need to work within each class period. And it may vary. So here, for example, we have a lot of meets. We have one master's. We do have two criticals. If I were to get a class period that doesn't have that many criticals, I know that I need to hit different things. So I would not do a thesis or not work as strongly with the intro. And perhaps what most students tend to miss would be from meets to masters to be able to show that growth. Then I would focus a little bit more either on the essay, which is the organization and development of ideas, or if it's multiple choice, then I would focus on that multiple choice in accordance to how students are doing with these bands. The next thing that I like to do, and finally, the last thing that I like to organize, is that this is my student achievement goal, which is a 57. This is what I want to hit when it comes to growth. I want to make sure that I hit my goal of 90, 60, 30. These are some things, let's say we're getting ready and revved up for STAR. So here, if I noticed that it was the argumentative essay that they were struggling with, and this is what I would work on, I would come in and still hit the multiple choice because we need both of these in order to show mastery for students. And so this is how then I would align my calendar leading up to the day of STAR. So this is actually what I did in order for STAR test day, which for me was Wednesday the 16th. And then as an incentive, I also treat students with McDonald's, muffins, Starbucks, coffee, creamers, juice, and cups. And this is just to take away the stigma of STAR testing is boring. We're not going to do well on testing days. So I've noticed that when I provide this for students, then it's actually very beneficial for them. They get excited now that they're starting to test, and they look forward to test day because of these incentives that I'm able to do. And so, pretty much in general, this is what I focus on. This is how I look at data. This is how I show growth with my data. And this is how, since TIA allotment came out, this is how I've been able to hit that mastery with TIA and then also within my campus.